Hello, hi. This is Paul Glumaz, and today is the 8th of August, 2020, and we are in the nicest part of summer, and we are looking at a total perfect storm of a super crisis. Everything coming down at the same time in the middle of an election. And so this is being brought to you by General Welfare Presents. And today I'm going to begin with two things that have popped up that have revealed things that have often people thought about, but they were never quite sure about. And one of these was a few days ago. John Bolton, the former national security advisor, was doing a webinar interview with the Aspen Institute. And he was asked a lot of questions. And what he revealed in an attempt to sort of denigrate the President Donald Trump has opened up or certified certain things that many of us have thought, but weren't sure about. Okay, about the relationship of Donald Trump with his cabinet, with the establishment, and so forth and so on. The second thing that was an article in a publication called Spectator about the transition integrity group that put together a kind of a scenario games of how the Republican and the Democratic game players would respond to various scenarios. And something very shocking came out of that, and I'll go into that as well, because it begins to give you a sense of where we're headed in the election coming up. So in the interview with the Aspen Institute, Bolton reveals that Donald Trump, from his point of view, has no ideology, no philosophical orientation, and that his actions constitute, and this is a direct quote, an archipelago of dots with no real consistency or reason or rhyme, except from the standpoint of his desire to be reelected. Now, that's very significant, and I'll get to that. And then he was asked about the sanctions on Russia. And what Bolton said is that basically Trump had to be brought kicking and screaming to go along with the sanctions that were imposed on Russia. And the only thing that kept him in line doing this was the threat of a Republican Senate desertion prior to the elections. So in other words, the actions that Trump went along with were not his actions, but he was basically blackmailed into going along with the threat of a desertion of the entire a large portion of the Republican Senate. He said that Trump was primarily obsessed with the trade deal of the century with China in order to be reelected, and that was his major obsession. And so the significance of this is the following, is that Trump does not share any of the philosophical or axiomatic views that have dominated U.S. policy since the end of World War II, right? Bolton makes very clear that Trump doesn't see NATO as being necessary. That the troops, we shouldn't be paying for all these troops overseas. And what Bolton indicates is that he spent his entire time trying to not only undermine Trump, but in his view, minimizing the damage that a non-ideological Trump was creating to the long-term policies that have dominated U.S. foreign policy and military policy, for a long time. And the significance of this is that Trump does not see the world through the prism of geopolitics. He does not see the world through the prism of us versus them. That Trump sees no reason to maintain the troops overseas at great expense because he doesn't see the world that way. He doesn't see the world the way the entire establishment sees the world. The entire worldview. He doesn't have the same worldview. He does not see the world through a zero-sum game. These troops and the tensions of geopolitics are essentially aspects of maintaining not only a divided world, but controlling the world under a globalized financial system. He is not committed to that system. Okay? And this whole idea of scarce resources. We're fighting for scarce resources. We're fighting for control. Now, Lyndon LaRouche has always maintained that you cannot stop the drift to war through just mere arms negotiations, but only through a common a commitment to work in an area of mutual benefit. And for Kennedy, the way Kennedy wanted to end the Cold War was to get the United States and the Soviet Union to collaborate together on a space program. The way Lyndon LaRouche tried to get an end to the Cold War and create a different dynamic, a different orientation, a different worldview for the future is similar to Kennedy, where you work with Russia together for the development of the technology to knock out the missiles. LaRouche's policy, which Reagan adopted, which was called the Strategic Defense Initiative. Not mentioned by Bolton is that Trump's worldview of the future is centered on space exploration, on scientific development, which means you don't look at the world as a zero-sum game. You look at the world as a development. So you work with China to develop, you work with Russia, you work with everybody. Everybody benefits. And he most of all rejects the entire climate fraud on which the decarbonization is to take place, which will in turn accelerate the depopulation of the planet, or neo-Malthusian. He totally rejects that. But that is an axiomatic basis. This Malthusian was an axiomatic basis of U.S. policy going back to Henry Kissinger and National Security Study Memorandum 200, which was from 1974, which was declassified in the early 90s, which states that the primary threat to U.S. interests was the industrial development of the third world, not the Soviet Union. Okay, that's a neo-Malthusian or Malthusian worldview that has been the dominant focus, and now it's taken the climate change. It's gone to the climate change orientation, but it's the same worldview that goes back to Kissinger and the 70s. Now, in other words, Donald Trump does not personally share any of the governing policy axioms of the entire establishment. And that's essentially what Bolton is making clear when he says that Trump has no philosophy, has no ideology. And what Bolton makes very clear is that if Trump is elected or reelected, they won't be able to keep him on a leash. He's going to do what he wants to do, which is not what they want to do. And so basically that was Bolton's message. You have to keep him out of the White House. But then he said, well, Biden isn't that good either. It will be just as bad. It'll be, but not as bad. It won't be as bad. Now, this is how serious the situation is. They want to get Trump out. They want him not to come back into the second term. And in the middle of all this, okay, so now we go to the second item, which is significant. Okay, the second item. Okay, and that is, so before I get to that, it now becomes clear that everything done by Congress, both sides of the aisles, the media, the financial crowd, the policy crowd, that has government policies to contain Donald Trump's worldviews from becoming the orientation of our republic. So how are they going to do that? So this comes the next aspect. So several days ago, there appeared in the Spectator a report by the Transition Integrity Project on the transit, which did these scenarios. And essentially, the person who was brought in to play Biden was John Podesta, who was formerly the head of the campaign for Hillary. And Podesta was playing Mr. Biden. And the scenario was that Trump won the Electoral College vote, but not the popular vote. The other one was that he won both the Electoral College vote and the popular one. So in the game, in that scenario, Podesta shocked the organizers by saying that he wouldn't concede in that event, and he would allege that there was voter suppression, and that the governors of Wisconsin and Michigan, who are Democratic governors, would claim voter suppression and send pro-Biden delegates to the Electoral College and not the ones that people voted for. Okay, this is very interesting. He would also say that California, Oregon, and Washington State would threaten to secede from the union if Trump took office. Think about that. That's where they're expecting the biggest vote. So they're going to threaten to secede if Trump takes office. And Podesta, as Biden, is instigating a secession. Actually, a civil war. And that they might allow Trump to take office if he conceded on the following: that Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia would become states, California would become 5 states, the Electoral College would be abolished, and no Supreme Court justices above 70. And he also said, as the Biden, that he would go for a breakdown of the joint session of Congress by getting the House of Representatives, by getting the partisan Democratic Congress to reward Biden with the election, even though Biden did not win the Electoral College vote or the popular vote. And if those demands were not met, you would have a lock-in, and you would not have a president assuming office on January 20th. So that is what is being discussed as the like the insurance. Well, this is pre-insurance. This is like, okay, if it doesn't go the way we want it to go, we're gonna do it. We're gonna claim voter suppression. We're gonna just go in there, and on January 6th, when the joint session of the Congress has to certify the elections, we're just gonna put in Biden if they don't do what we want. You get a sense of this. This is this is like 90 days before the election, and they're already talking like this, right? This is very serious. Okay, very serious. This is how serious it's going to get. So now, in the last 2 weeks, okay, certain battle lines have been drawn. The whole Black Lives Matter thing flopped. Yeah, it's mainly a white people thing. It's also hundreds of millions of dollars going to train people in white people, primarily, in anarchist violence and tactics for the election. That's how it's being used. And the same apparatus that is the Obama apparatus, that's the apparatus that is running this with the money coming from people like Soros. And they're also funding all these mayors and other officials, and they're going for a defunding of the police in order to create a situation where people are afraid that this mob will target them. And I know personally an individual who is a candidate for conservative candidate for the state house here in Washington, who has regular death threats from Antifa. Okay, because of her outspoken views. And this is one person I just know personally. All right, this is the kind of thing that happens. Antifa will call you up, will threaten you, will send you death threats, will give you pictures of your children. I'm telling you, that's what's being set up. It's very dangerous. You think they're just out there burning down the buildings and stuff like that. No. If you're a public figure, your life is going to be threatened. That's how serious it is. This is Obama. Okay? This is George Soros. Okay? This is what they're doing. You think it's just about blowing up, have big demonstrations and riots? No, they're creating the force that can actually, go in the neighborhood and pick people out that are leaders, that are opponents to various things. This is what's being set up. And you defund the police, you also defund the protection from this. Okay, among many other things, around the criminal situation and so forth. So that's one of the battle lines. So that's one of the battle lines. Now, the other big battle line is the Green New Deal. Trump is totally opposed to it, and the entire Democratic establishment is going for it. They're going for it. And the Green New Deal means decarbonization, means deindustrialization. That means a much further decline of the United States. So that's the kind of thing that's going on. Now, in the last several weeks, there has been an activation by the LaRouche movement, which has had major, significant ramifications. What happened is that after Roger Stone was commuted, he went on Hannity and he revealed that he had prepared the testimony of Bill Binney on the fact that there was no Russia hack for the court. And Justice Jackson turned it down. I mean, wouldn't allow any of this evidence to be presented. And that was the same evidence that Binney presented to the former CIA director, Mike Pompeo. Now, this whole Russia hack narrative is still going on. It's totally fraudulent. The forensic evidence exists. And so a week and a half ago, there was a press conference with Binney and Kurt Wiebe, one of his collaborators, and it ended up being picked up by thousands of blogs on the Russia hack. And then a week ago, Roger Stone, Binney, did a webinar with the LaRouche movement. And Roger Stone revealed a lot of things. And especially around why George Bush wanted to put LaRouche in prison. And that he was aware that that if Trump won, and that he was going to come under attack, and Trump was going to come under attack because they saw what was done to LaRouche. Okay, so he was aware of this. Now, so far, no Democratic figure, no Republican figure has come out and said anything contrary to the Russia interfered in the election, Russia did the hack. Nobody has come forward. Even though thousands of blogs across the world are playing the presentation by Binney on this. So why is this the case? And the reason is that this narrative is at the core of the entire foreign policy of the system, of the empire, of the permanent war, permanent financial system control. It is based on this type of narrative that Russia is the adversary, just like the Soviet Union was the adversary. And now China is the adversary because they're building the Belt and Road. And this adversarial relationship has to be based on something. Russia's not a communist country anymore. They're a Russian Orthodox country. They're a Christian country. They're not really, you can't say, oh, the communist menace from Russia. You can say that about China still, because they still have a communist party. But, so what they're doing is maintaining this fraud of the Russia hack, which is a total fraud. And we are very close to breaking that. And I'm hoping that if we do enough of this, at some point, Trump will tweet the forensic evidence. And that could have a huge impact. So that's essentially why this Russian narrative is so important. And breaking the this Russia hack narrative is so important. It's to break it. So now we entered the election. We're coming into this election. And it's only the beginning. And the key is going to be how visionary Donald Trump presents the next Trump administration. Because the current Trump administration, it can't do anything. The Congress, both sides of the Congress are against him. The entire institutions are against him. He's a Home Alone president, like the movie, like the kid in the Home Alone. He's a Home Alone president in the middle of an insurrection. So he can't do anything. But the second term, as John Bolton is making very clear, it's the second term that is the key. And that's where we are. And Joe Biden is Obama. And all the horrors that I'm describing with the Green New Deal and Antifa and the surveillance state, coordinated with Antifa, coordinated with on the ground, it's going to be living hell. The country won't survive. I don't think the country will survive a third Obama term, which is what we face. So with that, I wish you the best and tune in next week. Take care.